I'm Rabbi Patrick, and welcome to Kihila. Lots of cool stuff coming up. So, Friday, June 13th, Shabbat dinner at my house. Yeah, you got it. You're going to come to my house in Midlothian. I mean, you don't have to, but it'd be nice if you did. Adults, kids, Jewish, not Jewish, we don't care, as long as you're a cool, generous, loving person, or at least are attempting to be. Dinner is going to be made by me. You may even get one of my homemade challah oats. We've got tickets available for that. It's going to be Friday, June 13th, at 6 o'clock. You can come a little later, Jewish Standard Time, I understand. Some of you who have to cross the James River need to get your passports updated, the real IDs on your driver's license in order to, go on the Poite. I get it. Struggle is real. The next day, Saturday, June 14th, if you're on the northern side of this crazy city that we call Richmond, Virginia, Shabbat morning Torah study at the VMFA lawn. So we have a big platter of bagels and cream cheese and lox, and I bring some Torah study sheets, and we sort of talk about the week's Torah portion, and we try to gain some spiritual lessons from it. You do not have to have Hebrew experience. You don't have to have, Jewish day school experience, synagogue experience. We just want you to come, sit, touch grass, as the kids say, right? And quite literally, because that's where we hang out. And plus, it's a cool thing you can do as like a date. So think about it. If you want to do like a morning thing, you and the person you're kind of liking, or the person you've been liking for a long time, you just come. And you get free breakfast or brunch or whatever you want to call it. You can go learn a little bit with us, make friends, all of that. There'll be coffee. That makes it more fun too. And, you can go walk around the museum for a little bit, and then you can enjoy the rest of your Saturday. So that's Saturday, June 14th, 10 a.m. Next, coming up after that will be June 29th. That's a Sunday at Kava Club. We're going to be hanging out. We're going to do kind of an Ask a Rabbi Anything. So there's kava, there's some snacks. You can hang out with me. You can ask me spiritual questions. If you ask a question, you will get a gift. It's true. I have a big bag of gifts, and I give them away every time someone asks me a question. There's a limit of one gift per person, so you can't get like all of the gifts, but we'd love to have you. So that's going to be, I believe, at 6 o'clock, Sunday, June 29th. But if you want all that info, you need to go on our website, kehilarva.org, and you'll find out about what all we have going on, some more details, stuff like that. So let's get into the religion stuff. Let's set our kavanot. Let's set our intentions. What do you want to get out of this podcast? What are you in it for? Are you listening on your drive to work and you're like, hey, I need something to get me through today because the boss is being a jerk, and Ted in finance will just not get it right, and HR is driving me nuts? I don't know. I don't know what people do for a living, and I don't know what people do in offices, so I just like to imagine it's like an episode of The Office. But maybe it's something like that, or maybe the kids, like you got the kids off to school and now you finally have your time. And it's your time because you're also doing the laundry and vacuuming and whatever, but now this is your time. Or maybe you're going for a walk and you just need something to listen to while you look at the birds and the bees and the trees. Whatever it is, I'm just honored that you're here listening to this. So this is Exodus 31:16. And this is found, obviously, in the Torah. It's also found in our Siddur, in our prayer book on Shabbat. It is a song called Vishamru. So I'm not going to sing it, but I'll just give you, what it says. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'doratam brit olam, b'nei uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz, uvayom hashvi'i shavat vayinafash. Which translates to, the Israelite people shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. It shall be a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days God made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day ceased from work and was refreshed. Because it is a lot of work to make the entire cosmos. Okay, so what we're interested in is this phrase, Shabbat Vayinafash. There's a part right at the end. I was interesting. I was leading a Torah study years ago inside a conservative synagogue, and I was doing an etymology. That's a fancy way of saying breaking apart a word. And I don't even remember what it was, and I don't even remember what I was teaching. But I remembered saying to this group, and this was, by the way, this group was a challenge. So you had, I think, like 30-something people surrounding this large conference table that had seen better days, those days generally being around 1991. And in these, like, if you were a regular, you sat in the comfy chairs that surrounded the conference table, and if you didn't get in there fast enough, you had to sit in one of those uncomfortable banquet chairs, the ones that don't have arms. So it was like 3 layers deep, or gosh, maybe it was more than 30 people. Anyway, room was packed, right? And these were tough people. These were smart people. This synagogue, shout out to Ahavath Achim in Atlanta, Georgia, Peachtree Battle. This is the group. If you want to cut your teeth as a rabbinical student, if you want to cut your teeth as someone who's really interested in Torah, then this is where you go. You get told that you're teaching that. So I was teaching this one little word. We were just like breaking it apart into 1,000 pieces. And I said something to the effect of, well, and this is just how I am. Like, I'm really interested in the etymology. And Dr. Andy Zangwill is a physicist, turns to me and says, well, yeah, that's because you're a modernist. And I never really thought about that. Like, what's a modernist? Like, what's a postmodernist? What's a traditionalist? I think I know what a traditionalist is. But then I took some time and I started looking at this definition of what a modernist is. And I think it tracks, because if you're a modernist, you're interested not just in the Mozora, not just the tradition, but you're interested in how to get here. What were the circumstances of how it got here? You kind of make an assumption about this sacred literature that it was written by human beings in a human environment, and that it involves people, and it's everything from blood and guts to fire and wine to how do we create a civil society? How do we deal with the problems of the world? How do we raise our kids? How do we run kingdoms? Who do we employ in spiritual life? And what are we for and what are we against? And what does that say about us? What are the ideals that we hold true? And so if you're a modernist, you look at this spiritual literature that way. You care about archaeology and language and history and sociology. And I remember one time, fast forward years later, I was discussing some of this with someone here at Kehila, and I said, the thing about it is, if your religion, if your theology doesn't line up with history, science, art, you're in big trouble. I want to belong to something that can hold up to everything. What is the economics of, ancient Israelite society, and what does that say about us, right? I want to know. I want all of these things to be incorporated into how we think about sacred literature, because to me, this whole thing is a miracle. Maybe you've heard me talk about that before on this podcast. And I want to understand the miracle as much as possible, because I'm here, and why not? I want to know, it's like, I want to see the end of the movie, right? I want to know what happened. So this phrase, Shabbat Vayinafash, this is what I'm hung up on. So maybe you've heard this word Shabbat. It is the word Shabbat. It's the same thing. It means to rest. Okay. So we think of Shabbat as the day of rest. Okay. But that's not necessarily what it means. It actually means to cease or to stop. So I want you to think about when, April, May of 2020 happened. For those of you who remember it, right, in the before times. And we were told, like, hey, 2 weeks, stay at home. We'll get through this. And then 2 weeks kind of became like 2 years. But we were told, like, work from home, right? It'll be fine. Sit on the couch or just kind of stop for a while. Stop the normal rhythm of things. And then we'll figure it out from there. And we did. Like, we got there. It took us a while, but we got there. But I want you to think about those times, right? Those times where if you were a person who could work from home, Suddenly you're not wearing the uniform, the office clothes, the whatever, and you're sitting in front of a Zoom call, this like endless Zoom call. Maybe you're one of those people, hey, let's get real. Some of us started drinking, wine at 3:00 in the afternoon, right? It was tough times, all right? But we did sort of weirdly have the thing that we wanted, which was to not have to commute, not have to go to the office, to the job site, to the whatever, right? To not have to travel somewhere that you didn't want to. Now, this wasn't the case for all of us. A lot of us still had to go do stuff. I was one of them. I got out there as fast as I could, stayed as safe as I could. That was a very interesting conversation to have with Stephanie. How am I going to do this when the world needs me out there? But it was definitely simpler. Wasn't easier, but it was simpler, right? Like leading a Passover Seder on the internet was easy. Leading Hanukkah on the internet was easy. But I wouldn't say it was restful, right? It was definitely a Shabbat, but it wasn't restful. Restful implies something different in English. To cease from work, yeah, but no, because I was still sort of working, right? Not just working a job, but there wasn't that thing, like if you go on vacation or you have like a long weekend, whatever that may mean for you, and whatever was on you is just off of you, right? That's the difference between stopping and resting, okay? Resting implies that, that energy within you gets filled back up again, right? And now you can go back out and give it out to the world. Or, so I have this chronic illness. And some of the people in my community of people who share this syndrome, we talk about spoons, like how many spoons you have. So when you really rest, you get more spoons back. So we all rested, we all Shabbated, which isn't a word, during this kind of April, May 2020 situation, right? But it wasn't restful at all. So Shabbat Vayinafash. So the Shabbat part really isn't rest. That's not quite the right word. It's more like stopping. And then this phrase, va, which is and, yinafash. So Vayinafash. It's translated here as refreshed, right? Ceased from work. Okay, we get what that means. That just means to stop, but like the Energizer battery inside of you is still going and going and going. So then there's the Vayinafash part, and to be refreshed. So take it back to the theological, right? For in 6 days God made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day, Shabbat Vayinafash. Okay. God was refreshed? What refreshes God? I feel like there has to be a better word in English than this. Furthermore, there's this phrase, nefesh, that is inside of the word Vayinafash. And there is a French rabbi named Rashi, and he says that this phrase, and he rested, it says every form of nefesh is derived from the word nefesh. I know you're reading this and like it's a little bit weird to read, but like every form of nefesh is nefesh, which is the word for soul. The idea is that one calms his soul and takes a breath when one reposes after the toil of labor. And so you find this in the book of Isaiah, which is also where Rashi gets this idea that it is about this idea of soul reposal. Okay, well, now it's even more complicated, I feel like. So what does it mean for God to have a soul reposal? That's worse than refreshed. Okay, so going into some modernism, because Rashi's old stuff, Robert Alter, he's the man. Robert Alter, literature professor, looks at the Bible from a literature perspective. I have he did an entire commentary on the Hebrew Bible. It took years and years and years for him to do. And listen, source material for sermons forever. This man, like, he just chat GPT'd me before chat GPT existed. There's so much. You don't buy the Robert Alter Hebrew Bible because you need the Hebrew Bible. You buy it for the footnotes. You buy it for the translation. It is incredible. No affiliate marketing links, whatever. I'm just saying I love it. Anyway, Robert Alter claims that the word Vayinafash should be better translated as caught his breath. Caught his breath, based on other uses found, okay? And so here we have a little bit more of a modern thing, breath catching. And we have a little older thing, which is like soul reposal. This translation, though, about caught his breath, this also reflects an idea found in this really great book called God and Anatomy. And it was written by this woman who I love referencing her in text studies because her name is really hard to say and it's fun to watch people try to get it because it took me a minute. Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou. Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou. Okay, so Bible professor at Exeter College. She takes this very anthropomorphic view of God in this book, God and Anatomy. And she views this way of looking at it as a way of better understanding ourselves. So she uses this kind of catchy phrase, a God made in our image. Right? Because it's the opposite in our tradition, right? We are made in God's image. But what if we looked at it the other way? And so she goes along with what Robert Alter says, that it's the word breath. Now here's where this gets interesting. It is not one thing or the other, that Vayinafash, nefesh, is soul or breath, because the Bible uses it both ways. Soul and breath are the same thing. And it makes sense. I talked about this before. You know, you go running and your soul feels lifted. You do that yoga class, right? You're in the garden and there's something about putting your hands in the dirt. And it's not just that you feel good and you had the exercise or whatever, you sweat out the stress, but it's like some burden was lifted off of you in that physicality. And it's not just in the moment of like doing the exercise, it's afterwards. It's the coming down from it where it feels like soul, breath are together. Like your body is in mind and spirit are all in kind of a unity with one another. You know, the word disease, it's actually a compound word and it's dis-ease. So in those moments after the toil of something and you have that moment of repose, you do catch your breath, but it's also, mission accomplished. And you feel like, even though you're tired, like you somehow have more energy, right? This rabbi named Adam Kligfeld, in a sermon on this Torah portion, or these pasukim, these verses, I should say, says, what did God do on the seventh day? Better yet, what is God trying to tell us about our experience of Shabbat by using the word Vayinafash to reminisce about that initial Shabbat of creation? Here's where Rashi comes in. He first says that Vayinafash means God rested, but then he explains the meaning of that rest. God restored God's own soul and breath by taking a calming break from the burden of labor. By using this anthropomorphism, Rashi invites us to imagine a God with a soul, a God with needs, a God who could be, as it were, burdened. So, in other words, what did God do? What is this Vayinafash? It is God catching up to God's own sense of self. It is God reintegrating. Because when you're in the creative process, when you're making something, you're doing heavy work, you're lifting the thing, you're painting the thing, you're caring for the thing, right? You give out yourself, you give the spoons away, right? And then when you can have that repose, soul, breath, energy, body, intention all come together, right? You catch up to your own soul. Because your soul's been running, go. And then you stop and it still keeps going. But that repose, where breath and spirit and body all align, it's like it pulls back, right? It's like if you've ever played with magnets, right? And you point the magnet and it pulls the other magnet. Same thing. Vayinafash is to catch up to your own sense of soul. So now, I want to talk about the American Heart Association. So, according to the American Heart Association, sedentary jobs have increased 83% since 1950. Physically active jobs now make up less than 20% of the U.S. workforce, down from roughly half of jobs in 1960. And that's from Johns Hopkins Medicine. So here's what we know. Sitting around doing nothing or doing stuff, but like not necessarily putting ourselves out there, that's definitely a lot of ceasing, right? We ceased from having that toil, and yet I wouldn't say we're a Vayinafash society, right? For all that sitting that we did during COVID, right? We weren't more restful. I think that's for sure. There's a difference between ceasing and catching up to your own soul, your own spirit, your own sense of self. That's why it's not just God stopped. It's God stopped and caught up to God's own sense of God, right? There are times when you stop, but you're still giving yourself away. You're still allowing all of that energy to float out to someone, to something, somewhere else. Okay? We are definitely a society that sits around more, that's for sure. But are we a Vayinafash society? Are we people who believe that the soul must be refreshed? I think the answer is no. And what backs me up on that is a book called Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. And he outlines these like 12 different things. I'm going to give you a few of them because he asks the question like, why are we so distracted? Why do we have trouble focusing? You know, you look now at like kids' homework, and I'm sorry, it's like a third of what we used to have to do when I was their age, right? Because it's true. Like, let's own up to it a little bit. Like the focus, the attention span. And it's not just a like kids on their phones thing. Like it's all of us. Let's admit it. We've all kind of lost a little bit of that lately. So here's what Johann Hari says. He says there's this issue of increased speed, switching, and filtering. In other words, a lot is coming at us. We have trouble jumping back and forth from one thing to another. And the way that we filter information is changing. So in other words, there's no such thing as multitasking. You can do more than one thing at once. You can maybe do two things, right? Hey, watch a parent of a young child. But when you get to three things, right? When you have like 12 browser tabs up at any given moment, right? You can't do any one thing particularly well. Now, people will say, but I'm in the zone. Okay, sure. But that's because actually you're filtering. You're blocking out all other things. That's why it feels like you're multitasking. You're really not. You're doing a single task that has little components to it. That's different than trying to be on your phone while having a meeting, while doing the laundry, while trying to figure out what to do about your aging parent, right? That's not, I'm sorry, you don't got it. It's just not a thing. We're lying to ourselves thinking that we have it. Those people that are doing multiple things at once and it seems like they zone out, that's called a flow state. That's being able to go deeply into something. That's like rock climbers, people doing yoga, people who paint, do pottery. Maybe it is emailing. Like maybe you just get into this state of consciousness when you email that the whole world disappears and you are like one with the emailing. That is possible. That's called a flow state. That's because you're blocking out all other things. We actually have had a decrease in the number of those flow states over time. That's technology, basically those two things. Physical and mental exhaustion are still a thing, right? Just because we're not necessarily out there like working in the factory or in the field doesn't mean we're not physically and mentally exhausted. Again, talk to parents of young children. There's also a problem of a collapse of sustained reading. This isn't a technology thing necessarily. There's studies, you just read the book and you'll see it. But basically, if you look at authors for the past 100 years, the writing style has changed where staying on a single topic, those older books tend to do it for longer. Books that we read now, they switch back and forth all the time. Paragraphs are shorter. Pages are shorter, chapters are shorter, because we just can't hold our attention for that long. And that's been going on for 100 years, so that's not a dang cell phone thing. That's just a thing. What about mind wandering, meaning the ability to just sit uninterrupted and stare out a window, right? To sit on a bus, to sit in a cab and look out the window and just dream? Well, if you have something buzzing in your pocket all the time, if you just have that natural instinct to look at Instagram, your mind doesn't have that chance to wander. I know people now, myself included, who do float therapy. So it used to be called something else, but now we call it float therapy. And you basically just go into a pod or a room and you float in water that's basically the same as the Dead Sea. And you remove all distractions, okay? So all of your senses, it's sensory deprivation, total darkness, all of that. So we're now having to do things like that to replace the fact that we don't have the opportunity to give our minds wandering time. There's other things. Surveillance technology is an issue, right? Your phone knows where you are, so it tells you, go eat at that restaurant, check in on that friend, go do this thing, right? And there's also a kind of cruel optimism about this stuff. Why don't you just meditate, right? Why don't you just download this app? It'll make you less stressful. Why don't you just drink this beverage that has a lot of magnesium in it? That'll help you calm down, right? So there's no responsibility on any of the previous 7 or so things that I've brought up and what we would need to do as a society to resolve that. There's also the trifecta of stress, diet, pollution, right? We're going through a lot. We're not necessarily healthy. We don't necessarily live in a healthy environment. And then, of course, there are medical reasons, right? So there are things like ADHD, which is on the rise. And there are things about, kids and how we educate them, right? Especially now with changing technologies. Maybe we're not making our lives easier. Maybe we're not making it any better for them to be able to have mind-wandering and distraction-free environments and things like that. So all of these things combined tell me that Vayinafash isn't just possible by downloading an app, by making a particular kind of kale smoothie, or some other form of what I called earlier cruel optimism. Instead, we kind of need a revolution. We kind of need to make big societal changes. And so this is where I get into my soapbox here, my 4 points, my 4 principles of the Vayinafash Revolution. So here's what I think we need in order to have a society that's going to be a lot cooler to all of us. So here we go. Number 1, and I think this may be the most important point on some level, we have to start believing that there is something essential and meaningful to humanity. So I would call this being made in the image of God. You could say we hold these truths to be self-evident. That's fine with me too. But there is something meaningful about humanity, and there's something essential to us. Point number 2, which is kind of part of point number 1, humanity's worth more than clicks. We're more than what we monetize. We're more than what we make. There is something that goes beyond all of that. You don't have to prove your worth in that way. Everyone is entitled to something. And that's this idea of Vayinafash, which leads me to bullet point number 3. Vayinafash, the right to catch up to your own soul, is a human right. It's just that simple. It's a human right because you're worth more than what you make and what you do and who you are. And that's because there's something essential and meaningful to humanity. It's a kind of religious humanism in a way. So those 3 points, you can take those on your own without the Jewish part. But here's the Jewish part for me. Shabbat as a time where you are minimally entitled to catch up to your soul. That's Vayinafash. I'd make a principled argument that Shabbat is the Jewish cultural method of Vayinafash, of catching up to your own sense of soul, spirit. So I hope you'll join me in that and in other things. Thank you so much. Remember, you matter. One more thing, I hope you'll consider donating for this podcast. Go to kehilarva.org/donate.